Welcome to We Are Not Here to Tick a Box with David Kane and Debbie Hayes. Episode 2, Vulnerability. So, welcome to episode 2, everybody, and we reflected on episode 1, and during episode 1, Debbie started to talk or hinted at the need to be vulnerable, and that's what today's episode is all about. So, to introduce it properly, I will pass over to you, Debbie.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that when we talked about vulnerability, my own reflections when I sort of spoke about that was in my own personal life experience, both in life and work, my strongest relationships have been formed in that vulnerability. And I think when somebody shows you their vulnerability, for me, that always feels like a real privilege that somebody's felt able to show that vulnerability to me.
Yeah.
And so when we look at that in a business context as well, if we can allow that vulnerability in the workplace, that's when we can open up to have that real strength of relationships. That's where that real team bonding is going to open up. And I just thought it was just really important to share that, you know, I'm sure most people, if they reflect, will find that true for themselves as well.
Well, when we discussed this word, and it might be a good idea to do an episode 2 on this one, it made me reflect, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, on a personal basis, in the last 2.5 years, I have become a lot more vulnerable in my marriage. I've been married for, I think it's 11 years now, just over 11 years. And I can honestly say that, that bravery, that courage to be vulnerable, I've only really done it in the last 2.5 years. And the impact that has had on the marriage, the strength of the marriage, the respect within the marriage is far greater than it's ever been. But if you'd have asked me 7 years ago, am I vulnerable? Am I open? Am I transparent?
Gives me,
and I said,
the goosies to hear that. Do you know what I mean? It you can feel the real connection in that, and that just makes me go, oh God, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And shows that even when we've had relationships for some time, there's still that space, isn't there?
Yeah, and you know what, the madness of this, the risk of going into a dodgy area here, but the madness of this is that we're perhaps never more vulnerable than when we're naked. Yet the mind and our thoughts and our feelings, we find that harder at times than shedding clothes, which is really interesting, isn't it? Especially with partners, in that case. And like I say, using my example, the fact that I'm saying I've been married 11 years, but only in the last 2.5 years I've been truly vulnerable. It's mad that I've had very little problem shedding my clothes during that time, but in terms of my true self and my thoughts, my feelings, and the rest of it, that's been held back. So when you said that to me, I can absolutely 100% give you the assurance, really, that what you're saying is absolutely right, even though you know anyway, because as soon as you said it, I went, yeah, that is right.
Yeah. So I think it's just worth, anybody listening reflect on that themselves in terms of the power and the value in that vulnerability. Because that's where the real strength, the bonds, and it has lasting impact. I can't think of many people that if you shared that vulnerability and formed those bonds, have they dissolved? So if you've got those real bonds and strengths within businesses, the impact of that could be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it probably, in a business context, it'll probably manifest itself in different ways. Again, reflecting on how well, this bit about vulnerability, how does that work in a business environment? And for me, a really good example of that is when people go off on holiday, especially managers. When a manager goes on holiday, do they find that they're really switching off? Have they been vulnerable enough to truly develop somebody in their team to do their job as good as them while they're not there? And often very what I've found in my various roles over the years, that managers tend to be quite guarded rather than freely giving information and freely developing people. They hold on to things because they don't want it to be seen that somebody else can do their job better. But actually the opposite is true. By actually doing that, by being that vulnerable, by having that presence of mind, that strength of character to say, no, I'm going to show my strength as a leader by creating other leaders. And because I can do that, I've got far more value to this organization than if I just basically managed in the way of holding on to things, if that makes sense.
I think the other thing for me talking about that as well, I think it helps you as a leader that if you're able to be vulnerable, it's easier for you to see where somebody else is perhaps feeling vulnerable, because you can recognize those things. And I can just recall a story there about an ex-client of mine recognizing that when they've got remote workforce, understanding actually people do need this sense of connection. So rather than me send that email, let me pick the phone up. Let me listen. Let me hear where this person really is, So that's quite interesting, isn't it? That, when we can tap into our own vulnerability, we can sense it in others as well, and check in and go, have we formed that real sense of trust? Are we able to have that open communication?
I mean, connection is key, isn't it? I mean, I've always said we're meaning making machines. That's what we are. Connection is vitally important to our growth in terms of our mental health, well-being, all of these things. It's all interconnected. But going back into the personal space, something that I just thought about a moment ago. It's about reflecting on, well, why aren't you vulnerable? If we're coming at this from the point of view that vulnerability is good, it's authentic, it allows people to see the real you, and it allows you actually to serve others and yourself better, because you're not trying to be something that you're not. You're being authentic. Why do we not do that? And I think what I find interesting is that for me as a man, is that when I was younger, and even to this day to a certain degree, these stereotypical views of what a man should be, and it's the same for women as well. What are our roles? Society have created certain roles, and of course traditional values around, you're the breadwinner, you're supposed to be the strong one, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be that, and of course a lot of those things actually are the opposite of being vulnerable. So the older I get, and the more mature I get, the more I realize that actually vulnerability is probably one of the biggest traits of being a man, than to actually present this position of Teflon, for want of a better word, just by allowing people in. You're more relatable. You attract the good around you more by being that way. So it's interesting. I think that society of it's the same way that the ages and society have created these roles that prevent vulnerability. We as society have got to knock those down and create what is a new version.
It gives you that connection.
Absolutely.
And people 100%. With connection, common purpose, can work together. And ultimately, that's what any business needs, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because at the end of the day, from a business perspective, you cannot grow a business, or you cannot improve a business, unless everybody within that business knows the true challenges of it. What are we truly working towards? There's no benefit from holding back bad news, for example. You've got to be confident enough that by being open, honest and transparent, that people will do the right things and work through collective responsibility for the common good. That's what they'll do. But again, you've got to be vulnerable with the truth.
And I found with a lot of my client base is that a lot of people are really motivated in terms of solving problems. So if we hide the vulnerabilities, they can't see it, they can't solve the problem.
No.
So if we are able, again, to look at those vulnerabilities, we can get those people motivated to go, right, we see it now. And because we see it clearly, now we can address it and pull together and do something about it.
And as somebody who used to hide my vulnerabilities, I can talk firsthand about that, when we go out and we speak to clients and other people, my reality in that instance, I can talk freely about it. And only looking back now, can you realize how flawed that was? It was flawed in terms of it didn't allow me to be the best version of myself, but equally it didn't allow me to attract the good around me and to embrace it. And like I say, sometimes you've got to go and do the opposite to really truly appreciate what you should be doing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And actually, I was only working with this whole concept yesterday myself, thinking actually some of those experiences give you the wisdom, don't they?
Yeah.
In which to go, right, that's the complete contrast to where I need to be. And it almost, when you've hit that edge, it's like, right, this is what bounces you back, isn't it, to what you need. So if we have those experiences in life, they're not wrong. They're there actually to serve you, to help you to see not that way.
Absolutely. And it's about us all having the presence of mind to understand. And again, we said this, I think, in episode 1, we're not perfect. We need to embrace the fact and actually to make, we've all done things in life that we regret, but we've got to make peace with those things, because to not make peace with them means that we will carry it around with us. And life today is going to be heavy enough without carrying yesterday with us. So it's really important that we're mindful of that. I love the fact that you say wise. The wise mind is a great thing. Thinking wisely is so powerful.
Those experiences, in my experience, are the greatest lessons.
Yeah.
And those lessons are where you get your wisdom from.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we can reframe them then to go, actually, thank you, because from that situation, that is where I've learned the depth of my wisdom that then you can take and share with other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think it's a great point, and I think that any individual out there, any organization out there, to consider what we're saying and to appreciate that in order to be the best that we or the business can be, that vulnerability, truth, honesty, authenticity, these things, they're going to play a vital role. And I've got a phrase, and that is that leaders go first.
Yeah.
You create the permission for people.
And that's exactly what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Here is the permission slip.
Yeah.
Here's the permission slip as leaders to be vulnerable, because there is massive value in it. Providing
that we listen.
Absolutely.
If you're going to ask the question, if you're going to provide that permission, regardless of what comes back, what we've got to be able to do is to not take anything personally, to not be offended by anything. It's somebody's truth. It's the way somebody's feeling, and be able to really reflect on it and work the problem or whatever it may be through correctly. So it's all well and good saying here's permission, but only allow that to happen if you are willing to listen. That's the key. And
that's another episode coming up.
That could be another episode.
That will be definitely another episode coming up. Listening, gosh, huge.
Join us on the 1st of November for episode 3, Listening.